Hello there and welcome. Today we are testing not engines, but we are testing this right here, fuel efficiency. Been a rumor going around, kind of the same like tire, avoid high risk curves, that underfueling can be a very good source of gaining some easy time. And we'll be testing that theory with two engines in particular, the Renault engine, which is the slowest but has the best fuel efficiency, and the Mercedes engine, which is the third slowest, has the worst fuel efficiency. And the goal here is pretty simple. We're going to see if underfueling is a source of gaining some time, and in that case, how much time. If you enjoyed videos like this, please like, subscribe, and I hope you enjoy. So we're going to do the Mercedes engine first, because again, it is the one that I have most experience with, and then we'll compare it to the Renault engine. But the idea here is pretty simple. We run the same car, which is why we're doing this at Bahrain, first race of the season, so cars are identical. And the only thing we swap is the power unit. So let us just jump straight into that first run with the Mercedes engine, and let's compare the times running no fuel, or rather as little fuel as possible, versus maximum fuel. And also make sure that we even make to the end of the first race. So to make sure everything remains the same, we're going to be using both the same setup for both runs with both engines. Again, we're going to be doing 4 runs, 2 on the Mercedes engine, one where we do minimum, which is what we're doing now. We'll go to as low as we can on the fuel weight, 91 kilograms, and we'll do the same for Antonelli's car, down to 40 kilograms. As you can, 49 laps, 91 kilograms. And as you can see, just like previous games, the reason why there's a difference in fuel weight between Piastri and Antonelli is actually the fact that smoothness also has an effect on how much fuel you bring to the race. Now, in terms of strategy, we are going to be running the same for both of them. We're not really going to be messing around much here. We're going to be using one of the optimal ones, which is to just use 2 soft tires as either light or standard, depending on what you prefer. And in this case, what we're going to do here is actually run them on aggressive. There's 2 reasons why we're going to do this. It's going to just ensure that we always pit around lap 20 and around lap 38, that we don't switch, to full attack towards the end of the stint or anything like that. It's just going to ensure that the race time for all 4 runs are equal. We're going to be pitting lap 20, we're going to be pitting lap 38 for every single one, and that should keep things somewhat balanced. That is the setup. We're going to be doing things exactly the same in terms of strategy, and for this first one, we'll be running 49 laps worth of fuel, and we'll see if we can recover that fuel by the end and still be competitive. We are probably going to end up running most of the race on conserve as a result. And again, this is the Mercedes engine, the most hungry one. Let's jump in and see what we can do. So in Bahrain here, for this test with the Mercedes engine, we are on lap 56 out of 57, and Piastri has just barely made it back onto what I would call a positive fuel level. Once this actually goes positive, we're going to put both of them back to balanced, which is basically, again, how we're going to be running this test. We're going to try and finish the race with a +1 balance to fuel, or at least as close as we can get. If there's any incidents, of course, we're going to restart the race. But apart from a couple of yellow flags that hasn't really had any effect on us, this race has been running fairly well. We'll probably push a little bit here with Piastri to keep the fuel level, but again, it's going to be very close to a +1, +2. That's going to be the aim at least. But as you can see with the Mercedes engine, if you underfuel maximum, you'll just barely make it to the end while running conserve for basically the entire race. Now, what does that give us in terms of a total time? Because again, we are going to just restart the race if there's anything like a virtual safety car or a safety car to slow us down. So the main thing that we're going to be focusing on to compare in this test is straight up going to be the full race time, 1:31:29. Now keep in mind, of course, there can be things that would, slow us down, like being stuck by other cars. But we are running with, again, a car that is incredibly quick compared to the cars around us. As you can see here, Verstappen survived getting lapped by just 10 seconds. And we're also running the base car that we were given at the start of the year, which we'll also use for the other engine. And that is why we have decided to do this. But yeah, 1:31:29 on the first run. And just to be on the safe side, we did not have any pit stop issues. And generally here, we'll take that into account. But as you can see, pit stops here average out to about 2.2 seconds or 2.25, somewhere around there. So if there's any pit stops that are way out of line, we'll take that into account when we estimate time. But 1 hour, 31 minutes, 29 seconds. We're going to do this again now with the exact same setup, except we're not going to underfuel. but we're going to run the same race strategy and just push the extra fuel that we have. Basically, what you do usually at the start of a race, push around 1.5 to 2 kilograms of fuel, and then get it back towards the end, and see if that gives us a better race time, or basically just running balanced. We're getting ready for the end here of the second race where we did not minimize fuel before. And as you can see, fuel is very much the same, 0.1, 0.2, just swapped around. So fuel-wise, they have basically ended up kind of the same as last time. And the gap between the first and second driver is at least somewhat comparable. Now we're just going to double check the total race time, but seems to be around the same. And I don't think there's going to be a huge difference there. So 31.43. So technically we are a little bit slower here by about 14 seconds. Which honestly means that underfueling could be hugely beneficial. However, I'm just going to double check here if we had a pit stop error. We did not. We did have slightly slower pit stops, but honestly it's a tenth, maybe two if we are generous. So it didn't really have any effect. So already here, at least in Bahrain, running a Mercedes normally fueled versus underfueled, it seems like we can save about 14 seconds. It's probably going to need a little bit more testing than what I can do in this video, but it does definitely seem to work. Mercedes engine, which again is the most gas-hungry one. We're going to see exactly how it works with the Renault engine, and if we get similar results, I think we can kind of concede that underfueling, as much as possible, might be very, very, very viable, but also keep in mind, with the Mercedes engine, you just barely survive Bahrain. Just like we did with Mercedes, we're now going to go ahead here and underfuel Piastri, and as you can see, 87.6, which means that we're around 3.4 kilograms lighter with the Renault engine than we were with the Mercedes one. We're going to be running the same strategy and everything, but this isn't really a video where we're going to be comparing which engine is best for underfueling. We're just going to be testing if underfueling is generally going to be faster than running a normal race. With that, we're going to be running the same strategy, but as I said, don't compare the time for the Renault engine to the Mercedes. That's going to be another video, honestly. But yeah, let's jump in and see exactly what the race time is, and then what it is when we do not underfuel. So here we are getting towards the end of the conserve stint, and as you can see, we did take a little bit over 0.3 there, but just like the Mercedes engines, we basically were able to push the first lap, but then we needed to run conserve for the entirety of the remainder in order to make this work. So keep that in mind. It is still going to be a very similar experience from Renault to Mercedes in terms of fuel consumption, or at least fuel delta. In terms of full race pace here on the Renault, we are going to take a quick look. But what I am kind of expecting from this is that you can probably underfuel every engine, because they seem to have their own fuel calculation. Basically go minimum minus maybe one lap to be on the safe side, and you'll probably be fine. So first run here, 31.47, and again, that's the number we care about. We're not going to be comparing engines in this video. We're just going to be comparing the underfuel versus regular fuel. Let's do regular fuel and see what that has to offer in terms of lap time. I'm sorry if I get a little bit disjointed. It took me 6 attempts to get this done without a safety car or virtual safety car. So yeah, it's a little bit frustrated, but hopefully the other one will go smoother. Oh yeah, before I forget, once again, decent pit stops here. About 2:050 for Antonelli, but we really just care about Piastri's. Basically around 2.2 seconds. So here we are at the end of the second run, the one where we have, well, not saved fuel. We had full fuel tanks at the start. As you can see, +1 on both sides here. Now, it looks like we're going to see a pretty similar result to what we did with the Mercedes engines, where the full push is actually slower than, you know, running minimal fuel. So let's take a look and see what the result actually is here. So it says 31.55 versus what was it, 47? So once again, it is a tad bit quicker. I might misremember that first number, so I better double check. But yeah, again, it showed that it is slightly quicker. And again, I've tried to minimize the, you know, the things that can influence it. We're just checking engine versus engine. We're not testing Mercedes versus Renault here. I just want to reiterate that. There could be some factors here, particularly with the drivers, because Antonelli is closer in this one than he was in the previous one, rather with Mercedes, and that could, of course, have an effect. And just to double check here, did, I believe, not have any pit stop errors again. Piastri had a little bit slower pit stop times this time around, but even then, it's basically still a bit slower, and it kind of just does kind of prove that you can run minimum fuel, and it does seem to gain you a little bit of time, provided you don't have anything that would force you, to use more fuel to get past, which again is a bit of a concern. So it's hard to say. I think I'll run one more test just to be on the safe side. We'll test the Mercedes once more because the gap was bigger there. But generally here, what it looks like so far is that you do in fact gain time by just putting as little fuel as you can in the engine. But this also, with how the fuel adjusts to each engine, kind of hint towards that you can do this with any engine. You don't need to do it with Renault, you don't need to do it with Mercedes, you can do it with any of the 4 engines. And in theory, it might make you a little bit quicker, but I would recommend put in not as little as you can. Go to the minimum and then plus 1 lap. That way you have at least a little bit of fuel that you can use to go for overtakes so you don't get stuck and lose a bunch of time behind other cars. But yeah, I'm going to take a quick look at Mercedes again, and we'll see if they give, again, similar numbers. So similar to the first run here, we get to the end of the Grand Prix with similar gap down to Antonelli, and also around the same amount of fuel, plus 0.2 for both cars this time, so maybe slightly more than we did the first run, which I believe was a 1:31.29. Let's see if this one was similar. And again, this was the minimum fuel run, just to be on the absolute safe side. And again, I do think that underfueling does have some merit at this point, because it seems like we're getting a similar lap time as the first time. It wasn't a one-off, 1:31.35, so there's still some variance here, of course. That's about 6 seconds slower than the first run. Let's check the second run and see if we still have a gap. So here we are, nearing the end of the full fuel race. Let's see what we actually did here. Again, we have kept the fuel just barely positive. Time-wise, we'll have to see how we did versus the previous one. 29 and 35 has been our, underfuel ones. 43 was our last fueled one. Let's see what the second fuel has to offer. 31.44, which is just a second off our previous fuel lap. But I think that kind of does at least give us a hypothesis. It gives us an idea, rather. Never mind, I can't speak. I've been too many safety cars, virtual safety cars, and the like, probably double digits at this point. But generally, what this is telling me is that it seems like underfueling is powerful. And again, you don't need to go full underfuel like I've done here. It's more or less just to see if it is viable. You can underfuel a couple laps. You will most likely end up gaining time as a result of that. Probably not a ton of time. But considering we seem to be getting somewhere between 10 to 15, or rather 5 to 15 seconds here by underfueling, you could probably guess that if you don't do the full underfuel, do half, you're probably still going to gain between 5 to 10 seconds, which could, of course, decide positions during a race. And as we've seen it with the Mercedes engine versus the Renault engine, it doesn't matter which engine you underfuel with, at least in Bahrain. Even if it has 50% efficiency, the game will ensure that as long as you run conserve, you should be able to make it till the line. And of course, you get a huge advantage if there is a safety car. So yeah, with that in mind, there were some concerns in the last video that I didn't really give a proper conclusion. And I'll be honest, I don't want to give a proper conclusion when I'm not certain that there is one. In this one, however, I can say that underfueling does seem to be very viable from these tests. It's very kind of hard to test this, really, because you need to do it over a full race. And there's a lot of factors that can influence race time rather than influence the race time. And that does, of course, lead to, difficult. It makes it more difficult to make a decision if it's working or not. But from what I've seen here, underfueling does have some value. Depends on how much value. But I could assume, judging by the fact that Renault gave us about 8 seconds in the test, that maybe if you run something like a Red Bull engine, you might be getting something between 15 to 20 seconds. If you run a Ferrari engine, maybe somewhere around 15. So it depends. Potentially, better engines, rather stronger engines in terms of power, might benefit more from underfueling than the others. Again, the Renault here didn't really work out for us, but again, we didn't have the exact same starting points, so we can't really compare the engines. We can just compare the times. I just want to reiterate that again. This isn't an engine comparison by any means of the imagination. But again, underfueling seems to have some value. Experiment it, see what you feel for yourself. And of course, this can also vary vary very, very much from track to track in a similar vein to avoid high-risk curves. Hope this video has still given you a little bit of an idea or some insight, and I hope to see you around next time. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.